Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Catherine McGarry. I'm the Mayor of the City of Cambridge and the Chair of today's Special Council meeting. We all received some good news yesterday that as of Friday, Cambridge and Waterloo Region have been given a green light to move to Stage 3 of the province's reopening plan. I know that we're all anxious to move towards economic recovery and to also see more businesses and services reopen and to get more people back to work in our community. Stage 3 means that there's going to be some indoor dining again, gyms and fitness facilities can start to reopen, as well as playgrounds, libraries, and other community facilities under public health directives. On behalf of Council, we urge business owners to take their time to reopen safely and for the community to be patient to ensure that all of the appropriate protocols are in place. We also understand that we can expect to hear from our Chief Electoral Officer and City Clerk soon on plans for the Ward 7 by-election. I want to remind our community that the operation of the by-election is not under the authority of City Mayor and Council, but it is the responsibility of the Chief Electoral Officer and Clerk to administer the by-election, and that the decision to postpone was done so with the safety of our community in mind. Ensuring our community safety throughout a by-election remains paramount. Staff at the City of Cambridge have been reviewing the announcement closely and will be updating on subsequent changes to our own services in the days ahead, so stay tuned. I want to give out a special heartfelt thank you to all of our residents of Cambridge. It's due to everyone's hard work and commitment to protecting one another that we've reached this important milestone. Only 24 out of the 36 public health districts in the province of Ontario were granted the green light to phase through, so that certainly is an achievement for our city. Since the beginning of this pandemic, there have been countless inspiring examples of the community stepping up to make a difference, from volunteers making face masks to people delivering meals, to businesses retooling to make necessary medical supplies. It's obvious that we've been in this fight together from the start. Our collective efforts and our sacrifices are paying off in the face of what has been our toughest challenge. And just some breaking news about our companies in Cambridge that have helped to retool to provide essential personal protective equipment for the pandemic. We are delighted to announce that there was an announcement today made by Premier Doug Ford and also Vic Fedeli, the Minister of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade, to eclipse automation right here in Cambridge this afternoon. The Ontario government is providing Cambridge-based Eclipse Innovations Inc. with $1,408,475 from the Ontario Together Fund to scale up its operations to manufacture made in Ontario N95 masks. These masks are an essential piece of personal protective equipment, or PPE, that's used to protect workers in healthcare and industrial settings. This investment is part of the government's plan to increase the capacity of Ontario-made PPE while supporting local businesses during the safe and gradual reopening of the province. And on a personal note, this is something that Steve May, the company's president and CEO, reached out to myself and other elected representatives here in Cambridge when he had this idea. I was able to link him right into the Ontario Health Command table with the person that's responsible for procurement in Ontario. And I know our federal MPs have also assisted in smoothing the way for this exciting announcement. As we reopen the province, it is essential that we have enough homegrown supply of PPE in order to protect all of us in the coming months. So congratulations to Steve May and to the entire Eclipse team. We're very, very proud of you. And in saying all that, I know that you know, but we all know we can't become complacent. This journey's not yet over yet. So although people feel that they're done with the COVID-19 pandemic, the virus is not done with us, and we can't afford to go backwards. Public health measures, as I've said, have helped us to get to stage 3. Wearing face coverings, physical distancing, and frequent hand washing are more important together as we open up. We absolutely need to keep up these measures to prevent a possible second wave. We want to make sure that kids get back to school this fall, and we also want to enable our businesses and our services to stay open safely. It is important to note, however, that we do have individuals in our community that cannot wear masks for a variety of reasons, and we need to maintain their privacy around those reasons. Experts have told us that even 60 to 80% of our population being compliant and wearing masks will significantly reduce the spread of COVID-19. And we're seeing that municipalities across Ontario are also adopting mandatory mask bylaws. We are asking our community to continue to be kind to one another and to maintain other measures such as physical distancing and hand washing, along with the wearing of face coverings. Now, as a reminder to members of council and our delegations, in the spirit of kindness and also procedural rules, we will ask that we maintain decorum at all times throughout our meeting and remind members that using disrespectful language will not be tolerated. Okay, on to today's proceeding. Again, we're excited to be here with you, Cambridge, for another special council meeting and another reminder that we're all in this together and we do need to continue to do our part. I'll now ask our clerk to complete a roll call of council so that we can confirm everyone's attendance as we're coming to you electronically today. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Mehta.
Present.
Councillor Mann.
Present.
Councillor Reid.
Present.
Councillor Wolf.
Present.
Councillor Liggett sends her regrets and will join us when she can. Mayor McGarry.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you. In addition, we're going to take a moment to welcome the staff we have joining us today. And if staff aren't here in the meeting now, they may come in and at other times throughout our meeting. So joining us electronically today, we have our City Manager, David Calder. Our Deputy City Managers, Cheryl Zonleiter, Hardy Bromberg, and Dave Bush. Our Director of Economic Development, James Goodrum. Our Director of Asset Management, Yogesh Shah. Our Chief Planner, Elaine Brunshaw. Our City Financial Officer, Cheryl Ayers. Our City Solicitor, Lisa Shields. Our Director of Communications, Suzanne Hiller. Our Chief Building Officer, Dennis Purcell. Our Acting Director of Engineering, Sarah Austin. Our Director of Parks, Recreation and Culture, Leslie Head. As well, today we have many staff joining us from our engineering, parks, recreation, as well as planning divisions. And we thank you again for being with us here today. And clerking the meeting, today we have our city clerk, Danielle Manton, and our deputy clerk, James Hudson. And thanks again to our technology services staff, Greg Algie, who assists in logistics for today's meeting. Now we'll move ahead, and we would like to begin by acknowledging that the land on which we gather today is the land traditionally used by the Haudenosaunee, Anishinaabe, and Neutral people. We also acknowledge the enduring presence and deep traditional knowledge and philosophies of the Indigenous people with whom we share this land today. As this is a virtual meeting, I'll ask that each member of council who wishes to speak uses your raise hand feature on your video call, and the clerk will track the speakers list today and invite you to speak. We'll move ahead now to declarations of pecuniary interest. A reminder to members of council that if you've made declarations of pecuniary interest at a previous meeting, you will also have to do so for the bylaw item related to that same item. So members of council, are there any declarations of pecuniary interest? Seeing none, we'll move ahead. So at this time, we're going to ask council for a motion to consider matters in closed session. Councillor Reid, I believe you have the motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Wolf. In accordance with Section S239 C, F, and K of the Municipal Act 2001, Council to convene in closed session to consider the following subject matters. 1. Advice that is subject to solicitor-client privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose. Litigation update. 2. A proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality. Negotiations regarding potential land acquisition. 3. A position, plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Does council have any comments? Seeing none, I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
In favor.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you. We will now move into closed session. Welcome back, everybody. In our closed session of council, discussion occurred amongst council and staff received direction regarding a potential land acquisition. We also have a motion relating to the litigation update that council received. Councillor Adshade, I'll ask that you read this motion out. Councillor Adshade.
Sorry, Your Worship, I wasn't planning on having this. I don't have it in front of me, sorry.
It's okay.
That's okay. I'll have Madam Clerk read it.
Yeah, okay, please.
Madam Clerk.
The council receive report 20147 OCM litigation update. Moved by Councillor Adshade, seconded by Councillor Mann.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
Thank you. That carries.
Thank you very much. Regarding delegations, as a result of physical distancing guidelines being in place, in-person public attendance at special meetings of council is not currently available. However, the procedures for electronic participation during the course of an emergency allow for the public to provide written submissions to the city clerk's office in advance of the meeting for items on the agenda, and to also call in via telephone to our virtual meeting. This afternoon, we do have 3 registered delegations joining us virtually today. So today we do have a presentation related to the Strategic Plan 2020 to 2023, Phase 1, and that summary report from Mr. William Shatton, for Vice President of Research and Analytics, Forum Research. And I also welcome Brooke Lambert, for our Director of Corporate Strategies she is our Director of Corporate Strategy. So Brooke, I believe that you will provide introductions once we have Mr. Shatton on the line.
I will.
Yep, so stand by. Good evening, Mr. Shatton. Are you with us?
Yes, I am. Yep.
Great, thank you. It's Mayor McCary, and I'm going to ask Brooke Lambert to introduce you. Thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, no
Through
problem.
the chair. Good afternoon, Mayor McGarry and members of council. I would like to thank you for the opportunity to bring this report forward today. This report outlines the work that has been completed to date on the refresh of the Cambridge Connected Strategic Plan that started earlier this year. I would also like to thank Nicole Drake, our project manager, for keeping this important initiative moving forward during a very difficult period of time for our community. Today, we are pleased to provide an overview of the feedback that we received during phase 1 of the strategic planning process. In particular, I would like to welcome Will Shatton from Forum Research to share some of the results from Cambridge's first ever community satisfaction survey. While we recognize that this information represents a snapshot in time, this survey data will provide a valuable baseline from which we can continue to monitor our progress. It will also be an input into many of our services and programs across the corporation as we explore ways that we can continuously improve. With that, I would like to pass the floor over to Will to deliver his presentation and answer any questions that council might have. Thank you, and please go ahead, Will.
Thank you, Will. And the clerk is just going to try and share her screen. So we'll just advise when we've got that up and running, and then you can move to the next slide. But over to you. I'll let you know when that slide's up.
All right, sounds good. Well, good afternoon, Mayor and City Council staff. Pleasure to speak with you this afternoon. So, as Brooke mentioned, my name is William Shatton. I'm a vice president at a research firm called Forum Research, and we helped the city administer its community satisfaction survey for this year. Now, I'm not sure if the slides are up on the screen yet.
Not just yet. I'll let you know when they are. We're just trying to make that happen. Woohoo! There it goes. So just indicate to Danielle when you're ready for the next slide, and it's over to you. Thank you.
All right, perfect. So onto slide 2, please, Danielle. So the methodology of the research project that we conducted was conducted through a telephone random digit dial. The survey was in field in February of this year. Qualifying criteria were basically you had to be a resident of Cambridge, 18 years of older, and not working for the city. We conducted just over 400 interviews through the telephone methodology. This leads to an accuracy level of plus or minus 4.9%. Onto the next slide, there are a few other kind of sources of data that we're integrating into this report. And we're using these as comparators. So in addition to the telephone survey, we also had an open online web survey. And we had just over 387 exactly respondents participate through the open channel. Additionally, there's benchmark data that we're using to contextualize your results. The benchmark data compares your results to similarly sized Canadian municipalities. Then a few notes on the presentation. The data set is weighted to be representative of the City of Cambridge based on StatsCan census data. It's weighted by age and gender. Throughout the presentation, I might refer to top 2 or bottom 2. This just refers to an aggregate of the top positive scores and the bottom negative scores. And then the last point is that due to rounding, the numbers may not be exactly 100. It might be 99 or 101 if you add them all up. That's just due to rounding. Okay, next slide, please. So we're going to focus on some key insights. This is just an overview of the report. There's much more detail that's available to you in the full report. But as an overview, moving forward onto the next slide, the first key insight we're going to focus on is overall satisfaction. In the city, we found that about 7 in 10 individuals were satisfied with their experience as a resident of the City of Cambridge. There were a few differences within the data. We found that satisfaction was higher with those who were elderly in the community, as well as we found that it was higher with those who did not have children at home, whereas those who had children at home were slightly less satisfied. As you can see the results here, it's broken out on a 0 through 10 scale, 1 through 10, sorry. And you'll see that in the satisfied positive elements, we have exactly 68%. On to the next slide, please. The next dimension that we're looking at is a quality of life, so overall perceptions of their quality of life at Cambridge. Similarly to satisfaction, we see just over 7 in 10 say that their life is good. This is a top 2 score. And again, we see that those who have a better experience, again, tend to have no children at home. This isn't the first time we'll see we're comparing with our benchmark. The benchmark for Canadian municipalities on this dimension is 84. So you're a little bit under the national benchmark, but we'll bring in another comparator that shows you something different a little bit later in this presentation. If we move on to the next slide, we're just going to drill down a little bit into what's driving this perception of quality of life. And we're going to start by looking at the different elements that your citizens feel have improved since they've lived in Cambridge. And these elements are largely around roads and infrastructure. So this is, from their perception, it's improving. Closely related to this is again, transportation, public transit as well. And then they're also kind of an arts and culture piece. The more food and entertainment options are perceived to be improving. If we move on to the next slide, we're looking at the opposite side of that spectrum. So areas where your citizens perceive things have gotten worse or are at least not improving. And we see there's 2 that are tied here pretty much. The first one is homelessness at about 25%. The next one is drug use and addiction at 23%. This is followed up by crime at 16%, and then we get down to some infrastructure items, infrastructure being poor at 12%, traffic conditions at 11%. So these are the big key issues in terms of perceiving negatively impacting both quality of life and satisfaction. And then finally, we move on to the next slide. We're looking at what is the most important issue. And the most important issue that the city can work on based on the feedback we received was homelessness and drug and use addiction. These are a statistical tie at 19%. And, obviously closely related to what they perceive as being what's getting worse in the community. So these are big issues that your community is saying that they would like you to tackle. Followed up by that, we have a 3-way tie at 9% with a lack of services and amenities, just the availability of affordable housing, and then road and transportation related. The next slide, please. We're going to drill down a little bit and look at an assessment of your city services. And then on slide 11, the next slide here, you'll see a breakout of how we're going to present this information. So city services were assessed on 2 dimensions, the importance of that city service, and then finally their perception of the satisfaction of that service. So how well is that service performing? So how important is this service to their overall quality of life in Cambridge? And then cross-reference that with how satisfied are they? So we're going to break this out into quadrants, we call it. So anything in the top right, it's a high importance and a high satisfaction, so that's a success. But anything that's on that red square is a target. So it's a high important item, but it's lacking on their satisfaction. And then everything else is kind of secondary. So on the next slide here, we'll break it out. And you can see that in the top right, in that your successes, emergency services, almost at the very top right corner, which means it was a very high satisfaction. It's also a very high important item you're doing very well on. As well in this quadrant, we have water and stormwater, as well as parks, forestry, horticulture, and cemeteries. So these items are your successes. In terms of areas for improvement, roads and transportation planning could be improved. It's an important item. It's high on the chart, but it's lacking on satisfaction, as well as economic development. Areas where you're doing well but aren't necessarily hugely important, recreation and culture. And then down in the bottom left, we have development services, active transportation, and customer service. Moving on to the next slide, just want to present one data point that we captured on customer service and communications with the city. And then next slide after that, I'll show you the results. And again, we're looking at top 2 here in terms of their satisfaction with the customer service. So those who have contacted the city or dealt with city staff on a variety of issues. Overall, about 3 out of 4 people indicate that that was a positive experience, which is pretty good for municipal services. And then moving on to the next section, which is citizen outlooks. So next slide. And then the next slide after that, the first topic we're going to discuss in this section is community and governance. And in this section, we tested a bunch of different statements, some value statements about the city to see to what level do your residents agree with these statements. And what we present on the right side, the top 2 here is again the overall positive agreement with these statements. So the first one is Cambridge is a welcoming community. 87% of residents feel that it's a welcoming community. 79% are proud to say they're from Cambridge. 78% feel that Cambridge is a very inclusive community. 73% trust the city, and then it drops off a little bit lower down into the 60s at providing opportunities to meaningfully engage with the city. It's a bit of a tough one. And then transparency as at 54. If we move on to the next slide here, important one, looking at taxation and value for tax dollars. So Cambridge, citizens of Cambridge, 3/4 of them, 75%, are in a positive metric for this. They feel that the value for tax dollars they're receiving is very positive in the community. And when we compare this with a municipal benchmark across Canada, it's 73%. So you're doing very well on the value for tax dollars. You're slightly above our national average. 3 out of 4 residents feel that they have good value. That was, and that's the end. So on to the next final slide here for questions. I know we're short for time, so I was trying to rush through that. I hope I didn't rush too quickly. But if you have any questions, I'm available to answer them.
Thank you very much, Will. And I see that Councillor Liggett has joined us. So we'll go on to questions from members of council. Councillor Reid, you're first. Go ahead, please.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you for the presentation. And it was great reading through that. And some surprises that I found that the community is very satisfied. I really think one of the things that jumped out at me was the 75% feedback for good value for the money that the taxes that they pay. So that really encouraged me. But on the other side, what I found a bit distressing and would like someone to speak to it was the fact that people feel a number anyway, and I'm not sure what that number is. You can probably pull it up for me, but there were a number of people who felt that we were not transparent and as a city, and I wasn't sure what that meant, and I didn't know if it meant that the council wasn't transparent, if it meant that our programs or our staff wasn't transparent, or I wasn't sure at all what that meant. But I found it somewhat disturbing that people would not feel that we were open and transparent to them about our decisions and what we were doing, and wanting to engage them at every level of what it is we have to do. So I'm wondering, my question then comes down to, what is it that people feel that we're not transparent about, and what can we do to improve that situation?
So I have some suggestions on this. I'll at least maybe start off the discussion if anyone else wants to jump in. But on that slide, it was slide 16, and that is the lowest dimension. I did a little bit kind of brush over it slightly, so I just want to walk you through this. So the question is the value statement question, and the value statement we're testing here is the City of Cambridge provides transparent government. And the point you're asking is 54% agree with this. I would just counter that a little bit by saying that we also asked them to what level they agree with this statement, and it's, I trust the information I receive from the City of Cambridge, and that was 73%. So 3 out of 4 people indicate that they actually trust the information they're receiving, but 54% don't feel that you're transparent, which is a little ironic because we're on an open live stream on YouTube right now. So it's pretty transparent. This is a nice anecdote for transparent government. But the other thing that I would add in here that might provide some insights is that only 67% felt that there was opportunities to meaningfully engage with the city. So what I think this is telling us is that they trust the information they receive, because transparency and trust we found are often related. But they're saying that they're not necessarily receiving meaningful engagement. So I think it may just be a perception around the types of communication materials they're receiving, and the types of communications they are receiving, or perhaps a lack of awareness on the different ways that they can engage and all the different information that the city puts out to its residents. So the information they do receive, they trust it, they enjoy it. But there's perhaps a gap in awareness. It's definitely something that you could mark as an area for further exploration if you do subsequent ways of research in the future.
Well, I certainly feel that it's something that we probably should look into. I don't know, I just find it a bit disturbing because I know that this council works very hard at being transparent, and so I want to make sure that that we get that message out to people and that they understand that we are transparent, we are open, and we certainly want to be engaged with all of our citizens. So anything we can do in that regard, I would see as a very positive move. So thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you. Well, we'll move ahead to Councillor Devine and then Councillor Leggett. Councillor Devine.
Yes, and thank you through the chair. Yeah, and I had the same concern that Councillor Reid had, and she delivered that message quite well, and that's something we really need to dig into. But the one thing that I find very, very interesting in this report, there's a number of very interesting things. It would appear that we have a rather stable community in the sense that 57% of the people that were surveyed have lived for over 20 years in the city. And that's a pretty high percentage. And the other high percentage that really kind of threw me, 57% of the people are 45 and above. So I'm kind of thinking our demographic is getting a little older as well. So usually with that demographic, you're going to get how they feel as a general rule of thumb. But I think we need to dig in a little bit deeper, as Councillor Reid had said. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Councillor Leggett, you're up next. Councillor Leggett. Just looking for her mute.
Yes, my unmute wasn't working there. Thank you, Madam Chair. Listening to the response given to Councillor Reid there, I have questions to that, because if it talks about the fact that 73% trust the information that they receive, and 67% find they have meaningful engagement, and yet it drops right drastically down to 54% when it comes to transparent government. So it doesn't seem to be a lack of what, well, no, maybe it is about a lack of what they would like to receive, but I think it's more about what they feel they are receiving. You know, they seem to be desiring more information that they're not getting. Was there anything in the questions for them to respond to where they could have said what it was they felt they weren't receiving in order for it to be transparent government? It's almost as if we're not giving them what they want.
No, unfortunately, this is one of the issues that we encounter once we start analyzing the results. You know, there's a finding like this that comes out of it, you know, that sounds like none of us are really anticipating. So we didn't set up the survey in such a way that we could do a deep dive on this particular topic. It's something that kind of came out of this that was a little surprising to us as well. So what I can do, I can maybe take a look through this, and I'll coordinate with Nicole on your end and see if there's something based on what data points we do have available to us, if there's anything we can do that might shed a little light onto this specific metric here that we're looking at, and get back to you. But like I said, this was something that I think surprised us all when we completed the study, and sounds like might potentially warrant another kind of study into this topic.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mann is next. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, I really appreciate the report and all the work that went into it. It's good to get that read on what our community thinks and how they feel, and the resources that they have available and those kinds of things. The area of concern for me was the five areas that were identified that caused people concern. And I think, William, maybe as we talk about transparency, will those 5 areas also be identified or worked on a little bit more? The thing that really bothered me was when I found that 45% of the people who were surveyed struggled to find anything had gotten better in the city of Cambridge. And sometimes the way we ask questions can get an answer like that. But I really hope that we have done things to really improve over the past 3 years. And it might just be a little more work to find out from those who did respond that way, or to see if there is something else that would give us an idea that we really did do better than what they thought. But if we didn't, we have a lot of work to do, and we need to know that too. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword. They've identified that these are the areas of concern where we haven't done as well as we could or should. How do we fix that, I guess, is my question.
Mayor McGarry, it's David. Could I ask Brooke to respond to that? Because I think you're really getting into next steps that we'd like to cover. So if I may, turn it over to Brooke.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Brooke.
Thank you so much. Through the chair. I'm glad that question has come up, because that is really the intent of this type of broad community satisfaction survey, is to figure out where we're starting from. It's given us a chance to look back at the work that we've done over the past several years, areas that were identified as priorities during our last strategic plan. And this survey also asked to sort of the community to kind of gauge where we were right now. So there's a lot of data that our team is working through. The other complementary piece that this allows us to look at is the community well-being survey that was also done. And there's an entire pillar on democratic engagement with additional information and details. So we're able now to take the results of this survey and the feedback that we received through that process, as well as all of the other feedback, and start to identify those areas where we do need to do a deeper dive, areas that might provide potential priority areas for the city through our strategic planning process. So in the next phase of this process, phase 2, we are going to be going back out to the community, and we can tailor those questions to get at exactly the types of issues that have been raised here. And we will be working with the steering committee on that, and shaping our engagement in all the different ways that we do that, to drill down and figure out, what does transparency mean to people? What is the information that we're not providing? We've done quite a lot over the past few years in terms of reporting out through our business planning, which is all online, through our infrastructure capital reporting, which is online. But perhaps people just aren't aware that that information exists. And so that means then over the next little while, we need to do a better job of bringing people up to speed on kind of where the city's at and how they can be engaged in the decision-making process.
That's great, Brooke, and thank you for that, because that really gives me an idea of how we take that information that we've gleaned over all the years and move forward with that, because there have been so many great things that we have done and really advanced the city. We have to make sure we pick up those pieces that people have identified to say, how much better can we address this? And I'm glad you addressed that for me. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Further questions from council? Councillor Liggett. Go ahead, Councillor.
Thank you, Madam Chair, again. When I look at page 13 of the report, which I think is page 49 of the agenda, when it talks about the most important issue, I see safety, and you may have addressed this already, but I wasn't here for that. What is the safety of the residents? What actually did that pertain to? Because I know that a lot of people are concerned with the top two and how safe they feel there, as well as the crime and violence. So were you able to segregate out what the safety of the residents' concerns were?
Yeah, so let me just pull up that exact question just to confirm. Yeah, so this was an open-ended question. So there were, this wasn't like we provided them with a list and they chose this list. So the question is that, if, in your opinion, what, if anything, is the single most important issue facing the city of Cambridge today? And then respondents could reply with whatever they felt was important to them. And then what we did was we kind of aggregated and grouped these responses together. So some of these responses can get quite specific. And then some of our groupings are fairly closely related, like safety of the residents could also be closely related to crime and violence, although that is a separate data point in our chart. Crime and violence is at 5%, safety of the residents is at 2%. So some of these are certainly related, and this is how that question was set up. So this was just a raw open-ended question. You could reply anything you wanted, and then we kind of coded these and sorted them into kind of categories. So it's but in the actual raw data, there are very specific comments, and if you'd like, again, I can kind of work with Nicole Drake on your end to share the exact verbatim responses, if you'd like, if that would help you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yep, that's an affirmative. Councillor Liggett, are you finished now?
Mm-hmm.
Yep, thank you. Are there other questions of council? Councillor Reid, go ahead. Councillor.
It's not a question, it's a comment. On various organizations I've been involved with, we've done strategic plans, and in some cases they gathered dust on a shelf, and other cases they were partially implemented. I just wanted to compliment our staff on the implementation of our strategic plan, and the fact that you keep us on track through our agendas, because everything is related to the strategic plan, and we can see exactly how we're going about making that strategic plan live. And I've never encountered one quite as good as this, so congratulations on how well you're doing.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'm going to ask one myself, and I very much appreciated this survey. It's the first time ever, and I think it's going to be a great benchmark for us as City Council and as City staff to continue to engage as we roll out the next strategic plan and engage our residents in looking at what services we're providing, what they're feeling about the city, what gaps there may be, what opportunities there may be, in order to really further define a strategic plan moving ahead. For me, a lot of what we see here is the evaluation piece. And I think Ms. Lambert sort of led into this, that this particular survey is going to assist us in helping to identify things we need to work on for our community and better engagement in the long run. And I think that we'll sort of look to the future on how we're going to sort of reevaluate where we're at in a couple of years' time to see if we've had a change in things. So, Mr. Satin, my question is, when you're doing this type of citizen engagement work, does your company often go back a couple of years later or a certain time period later and be able to assist in developing questions that really revert back to the benchmark and see how we've fared or how things are measured against this particular study?
Yes, absolutely. So quite often with municipalities across the country, we do a recurring research project with them. Depends on the municipality, depends on the need. Typically, these are either an annual or a biannual study. The cases where it's less frequent, sometimes they'll do it just once every 4 years, once every council term, but we'll do kind of ad hoc as need studies as they occur. And then each study is different. There is definitely a core cohort of key questions, right? So community satisfaction, quality of life, value for tax. And these are the typical questions that we have where we have benchmark data for other municipalities across the country. And then there's obviously, we have the flexibility to customize the survey for issues that are important to you at the time or issues that are facing your community that aren't in other communities. So there's lots of customization, lots of data that we have on how other municipalities have explored different topics. And then obviously we can work with the city to build out new questions for new topics that are just present in Cambridge or that the city would like to explore. But yes, typically now that you have this benchmark, if you do decide to do another wave, whether it's with us or another firm, the next wave of this can compare the results with this study, and then also compare with the national benchmark as well to give you some regional context.
Thank you. And my last question would be regarding what others have brought up ahead of me. And one of the areas of concern is transparency. And I think, it has been brought up that potentially it's the information that the city has isn't being seen, or we're not sharing either on the right medium or not sharing enough about some of the things that we're already doing. And that really also goes back to some of our constituents struggling to find what has improved in the last while. When it comes to looking at transparency, and part of that is that information flow back and forth with your constituents. We know that in the last few years, the way people obtain information has certainly changed, and social media is part of that. In your opinion here, would that have anything to do with constituents not feeling that they've got enough information, meaning they don't feel that government's transparent because it may not be in the social media sites or the media sites that they're actually looking for?
Yeah, and that's loosely what I was alluding to a little bit earlier. I do think, based on my evaluation, I've worked with lots of municipalities across the country. Based on my evaluation, I think you guys are above average in terms of transparency and access. So I, from my experience, and again, I've examined and worked with lots and lots of municipalities. I don't perceive that you're doing something that's less transparent than other municipalities across the country. I think this is just, either your citizens aren't aware that this information is available, or like you said, maybe it's a disconnect with the communication channel. I really don't think that Cambridge is not being transparent with its government. I feel like there's just that knowledge gap or awareness gap in the community. So there were some questions in the study that asked kind of what your residents, their preferred way of finding out information about the city is. I didn't touch on it in my presentation today, but it's in the larger detailed report. So that might help kind of, again, move the needle on this if you want to test this statement again, kind of, a year or 2 years from now kind of thing. So looking at those kind of communication strategies.
Okay. Thank you very much for your answer. All right. Thank you again for joining
Madam Mayor,
us.
could you adjust your speaker thing? I'm having difficulty hearing again.
How is that? Is that any better? Yep. Nods are good. Sorry. Thanks. It does tend to move on its very own. So we'll move ahead with this item now, which is again item number 2, the strategic plan 2020 to 2023 phase 1 summary report in the agenda package. So I'll now ask Councillor Wolf to read the motion in its entirety. Councillor Wolf, you have the motion.
Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Adshade. Strategic Plan 2020 to 2023, Phase 1 Summary Report. Recommendation that Report 20-067 CRE Re-Strategic Plan 2020-2023, Phase 1 Summary Report be received.
Thank you. Are there questions for staff at this time? Any questions for staff? Well, seeing none, I was going to ask one of staff, and really regarding the summary report. And I know that there's been some direction on how we move forward with this, but what would the next steps be here with this particular plan? How do we move forward from here?
Through the chair.
Yep, go ahead, Ms. Lambert.
I can pass that over to Nicole, who can talk about the process moving forward.
Thank you. Ms. Drake, thank you.
Through the chair. So our next step would be to move into phase 2, which is already underway. So although we have halted the community engagement during the pandemic, we've continued to do background work and continue to do research and review of our existing plans and strategies. So the next step now is to work with the steering committee and the staff project team, and we will be moving ahead with community engagement activities and working with some of our engaged stakeholders to identify themes and eventually goals and objectives that we will then discuss with the community. So at this point, the community is going to start seeing this project more. It will become more active, and along with stage 3 starting on Friday, aligns nicely. We can start thinking and planning for the future.
Thank you for the community engagement piece, I guess, too. Yes, I know we've all been halted by that. Thank you. Well, seeing no further questions of staff, does council have any comments at this point? Any comments from members of council? All right, seeing none, I'll now ask for our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Armetta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
Favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. So the next item on our agenda is the consent agenda. So if a member of council wishes to comment on any of the consent items, please let us know by using your raise hand feature. And in the interest of time, we'll look to vote on the consent procedure in a block. But if you wish to comment, you're certainly welcome to. Councillor Armetta, you have the motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, I do. This motion is moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mann, that all items listed under the heading of consent procedure for Tuesday, July 14th, 2020, council agenda be adopted as recommended. Item 1, the special council minutes from July 7th, 2020. Item 6, request for municipal approval, manufacturer's limited liquor sales license by the Glass for Reverence Barrel Works. Item 7, request for exemption to noise bylaw, Malloy Blaney Construction, Inc. Item 8, council information package dated May 29th, 2020. Item 9, council information package dated June 15th, 2020. And item 10, council information package dated June 29th, 2020.
I did it again, didn't I? Thank you, Councillor Mehta. Are there any questions for staff at this time? And does council have any comments? Seeing none, I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk.
Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. So our next item is item number 3, the sponsorship and advertising strategy. And we have Cheryl Zonleiter and Trevor McWilliams with us, who will be providing council with an overview of this report. So thank you both. So I'll ask Ms. Zonleiter, I think you're all set there. Go ahead, please. Thank you.
Yes, thank you through you, Madam Chair. Before you this evening is a report on a sponsorship and advertising strategy. And I'm here to provide some background. In 2018, you may recall that the city undertook to start the development of a sponsorship strategy. And this project concluded with a framework for a sponsorship program and involved quite a few divisions at the city and feedback from a variety of stakeholders. Today, we've brought before you the report to initiate phase 2 of this project, and that is specifically taking that framework and moving it along to the policy and program development stage that is required in order to implement sponsorship and advertising programs here at the city. So that is the intent of the report today, and I'm going to turn it over now to Trevor McWilliams, who is our Manager of Business Development, to provide you with a little bit more information on what we're looking to do in phase 2.
Thank you very much, Ms. Zonleiter. I appreciate that. Mayor McGarry, members of council, and senior staff, my name is Trevor McWilliams. I am the Manager of Business Development. Today, it's my pleasure to present the request to council to approve a new capital project for the sponsorship and advertising strategy, and request council to approve a new capital project to be funded from the Economic Development Reserve in the amount of $50,000. Council will recall, as Ms. Zonleiter noted, in 2018, KCI was retained by the City of Cambridge to create a comprehensive sponsorship and advertising framework. They had completed an audit of internal opportunities, assessed best practices among other municipalities, conducted public stakeholder messaging. In addition, KCI met with a multi-departmental internal staff working group for their expert opinions. The request before council will allow staff to proceed with a logical phase 2 of the project, namely the implementation phase. The funds, if approved, could be used for the retaining of a consultant, staff time, and funding of the plan, which is an estimated time frame of between 12 and 18 months. Staff is planning to report back to council on strategic points within the implementation plan process itself. This also could take the effect of creating policy and framework for the City of Cambridge so that we can proceed forward with the implementation plan. That's all the comments I have to say specifically about the report, and I am available for questions. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. McWilliams. Are there questions from members of council for staff at this time? Councillor Wolf and then Councillor Reid. Go ahead.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Trevor. Thank you for the report. Is there do you think we need to go forward with this right away, or do you think there's any advantage to waiting 4 months, 6 months until the COVID business dies down and we are more sure of what marketing strategies we should adopt? I'm interested in your opinion, whether we should do this right away or you think we should wait 4 to 6 months. I am in favor of going ahead with it eventually.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Wolf. A very good question. Certainly the current challenges at this time have brought into question many of our different projects. In this particular case, though, I think this project could go ahead, in my opinion, because it is going to take an element of time to get the policies together. And I think it would be advantageous for us to go forward taking the knowledge that we have now and also using the knowledge that we're going to get in the next few months of exactly what we can do and what we can ask. Many of these sponsorship opportunities will remain the same because Cambridge doesn't have anything at this particular time. We have memorials, but we don't actually have sponsorships which we could go forward. And this is also another possible element of a revenue stream for the city. So I think going forward at this particular time would be wise.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Reid. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One just about flower beds that I read. I was really quite interested in that because it was a thought that I had myself that, you know, would be one way of keeping our flower beds nice, but I didn't know from this whether it was going to be beds that are already there, such as those on Coronation Boulevard and those on Hesper Road, or whether these sponsorships were really for new beds or new gardens that we might initiate in the future.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Councillor Reid. Another good question. I think the sponsorship program will lay out a framework of exactly what we will be able to use. Certainly, I think it's an excellent idea that we use all our assets, both existing and future assets. As I noted before, I have been in contact with Parks and Recreation, and we really don't have a sponsorship for any existing beds, never mind future beds. So I think that would be an excellent idea, especially areas like Coronation Boulevard. Certainly I know the city of Kitchener, their Rockway Gardens are beautiful and are sponsored in certain areas, and anybody who's walked through there knows what I'm talking about. It certainly is something that Cambridge has the advantage of as well, having beautiful gardens. So I think it's certainly there before us, and as I said, going forward, a framework will be provided so that we could use all our assets.
Thank you. And my second question is around protecting the city's brand, because when I read that, I'm trying to envision in my head how this would actually work. And I know it mentions certain things that you decide on that might be controversial, like cannabis and alcohol and tobacco. But that led me to thinking about other things such as the environment. And would we want to have brands such as bottled water and other issues around the city. So I just would like a bit of a discussion around how we protect the city's brand. Who decides what we would accept and what we would not accept? And could you just kind of expand on that area for me?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Reid. Any framework or program that is brought forward will be brought forward and filtered through our communications areas. And you are quite correct, Councillor Reid, that we would have to be careful, especially in 2020, because there is different types of investments that the City of Cambridge would entertain and others that they would not. And we are confident that the framework would be able to filter that out. We would also be bring back any type of approved framework and policy to council so that council is satisfied that we could vet the investments appropriately.
Oh, thank you. That sounds great. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Are there further questions from members of council? Seeing none, I did have a couple. I know that I have spoken with some of my counterparts across the province of Ontario that have utilized groups or consultants that have come into their municipalities, taken an inventory of their assets, and then looked at sort of the going rate, if you were, at some of those assets. It's not just rinks and sports fields and rooms within a recreation complex. It can be libraries, it can be pedestrian bridges, it can be infrastructure or other things in our community. And one of the models that I've heard was fairly successful was for communities just starting out on potentially bringing a sponsorship program to their city. They retained a consultant who actually helped to write the policy to be passed by council, and then went ahead and did an inventory of assets and the possibilities of who may step up to the plate to sort of purchase some of that sponsorship opportunity, and usually with an end date in mind. We do have certainly one asset here that I can think of off the top of my head, and that is the Hamilton Family Theatre, who has paid for the naming rights for that facility for a few years. And from what I gather, there are opportunities to hire a consultant that would work not necessarily for a salary, but more of a commission piece on some of the sponsorship deals that they were able to bring back to the city. Do you have some knowledge of anything like that?
Through Mayor McGarry, with regards to the consultants, there is a variety of consultants that are available, and that is one of the things we're going to be looking at, is that if we do need an RFP for something like that, or if there's another mechanism that is available for us. So KCI has provided certain lists of our assets already. We certainly do have quite a lot that is available, and I have heard of the consultants through my extensive Google research when I was doing my report, so I do appreciate your opinion on that. I have not reached out to those consultants, but that will be what the process is for, so that we could find out exactly what is available for this. KCI did an excellent report, but of course there are other consultants that are out there that could do also an excellent report, and perhaps something creative as you had suggested.
Thank you, and I very much do see this as a potential revenue stream for the city. From what I gather from my counterparts again across the province, that the city of Cambridge is well behind some other municipalities who have been able to really achieve a revenue stream that really does help to pay for upgraded or new amenities in the city. So very much supportive of this particular report. But I also did gather that it does take some time to work with a potential donor and bring them on stream, and not just maybe businesses, but family members as well. The time period that you have put forward in this report, will that allow us, if we start now, then to maybe start realizing some opportunities in 18 to 24 months?
Through you, Mayor, absolutely, and that's the time frame that we're going forward. However, that doesn't mean that we're not doing research right now. Our assets are here now, and we have lots of city staff that know lots about those assets. And I will be bending Parks and Rec and other experts of exactly what type of assets are available and how we could utilize those assets in the future through something like this. And that the framework will provide us guidance on exactly what we can do and agreements on what we can do. So we don't have to wait that entire time to find out what we have now. One of the benefits, though, of the time of this is, just as Councillor Reid had suggested, or Councillor Wolf had suggested, it does give us a little bit of time to stabilize through these challenging times right now. And I think those extra months will be good, so that when we do launch a program, people will have a little more confidence, and it'll also bring more confidence within the city. Certainly, we just listened to your strategic plan and how people love Cambridge. I think this is a fantastic way to celebrate it.
Thank you. And now I think we're ready for the motion. So Councillor Devine, will you put the motion on the floor, please? Councillor Devine.
Just give me 1 second, please, till I find it here. There it is right there. Okay, can you hear me okay? Okay, good, thank you. Sponsorship and advertising strategy recommendation that report 20-099 CRE reads sponsorship and advertising strategy be received, and the staff be directed to implement the sponsorship and advertising strategy phase 2 as outlined in the report 20-099, and that a new capital project be approved with a budget of $50,000 in brackets to be funded from the Economic Development Reserve Fund to fund said implementation. And further, that staff report back to council with a sponsorship and advertising program once developed, moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Councillor Devine. So at this point, are there any questions for staff? I don't see any questions for staff. At this point, does council have any comments? Seeing no comments, last call. All right, so we're ready to vote on the motion. I'll now ask our clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Councillor Atshade?
In favor.
Councillor Devine?
Aye.
Councillor Mehta?
Favor.
Councillor Liggett?
In favor.
Councillor Mann?
In favor.
Councillor Reid?
In favor.
Councillor Wolf?
In favor.
Mayor McGarry?
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. All right, so our next item that we're moving on to is item number 4, page 20 to 39, the Fountain Street Soccer Complex design. So Councillor Reid, I believe you have the motion for this one. Go ahead, please.
I do. And it is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Mehta that report 20-172 CRS Fountain Street Soccer Complex design be received, and that council approve the transfers to from reserve funds as outlined in the financial impact section of this report, and further that council approve the award of proposal B20-39 Fountain Street Soccer Complex design to the MBTW Group of Toronto for the total cost of $365,803,060, including HST. This was being the proposal submission that scored the highest points from the selection committee.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. Did you want to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I was really pleased to see this come forward. Of course, it's in my ward, and we know that recreation is going to be very important to everyone and in the future as we move past this COVID-19 and get back to a more normal time. So I'm really pleased that this is going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. I see some questions for staff and Councillor Devine. Go ahead, Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you to the chair. This is a great initiative for the city. The location is phenomenal. The question I have, when we first started this project, there was a 50-50 cost share with the soccer club, I believe. Now, was that for everything, or was that just for the purchase of the land? Can staff answer that for me?
Yep, Mr. Bromberg, go ahead, Mr. Bromberg.
Thank you, Mayor McGarry. I'll just ask Shane Taylor, our landscape architect, to respond.
Okay, go ahead, Shane.
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the purchase price of the land, Cambridge Youth Soccer contributed 50% towards that. That is where their commitments have ended. So they're not contributing past the purchase of the land.
Okay, thank you. Well, there's always hope, right? Thanks.
Thank you. Are there further questions of council for staff? Seeing none. Does council have any comments? Councillor Liggett? and then Councillor Leggett, go ahead.
Yes, so Shane, this is where one of the sponsorship areas could be, though, correct? From the previous presentation.
Yes, I believe that through you, the chair. Yes, I believe that's the case. I certainly would be discussing the matter further with Trevor McWilliams and seeing what opportunities there might be for sponsorship. This project is very public, very exciting. So this would be a great opportunity. Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Sometimes I double click on this and it goes back to mute. Sorry about that. All right, Councillor Adshade, you're next. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. And just a comment. I'm a longtime former soccer coach of my daughter's team with Cambridge Youth Soccer and was involved with Cambridge Youth Soccer. So this is a very exciting development. I think it's going to be great for the city. And I think the location is ideal right off the 401 for tournaments. So I think this is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to this developing in the near future.
Thank you. Does council have any further comments? Seeing none, I would like to say thank you to staff. I think this is a really exciting venture for the city. We've waited for a while, and I know that there are many youth, many teams that are looking forward to not only playing on the team, but we certainly stand to benefit from some of the sports tourism that has really helped. And certainly I'd want to see this as a possibility for naming rights. So thank you to staff. I think this is a good move all around. With no further comments, I think that we're ready for the vote. So I'll ask Madam Clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Adshade?
In favor.
Councillor Devine? Councillor Devine, I think you're on mute. Thank you.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta?
In favor.
Councillor Leggett?
In favor.
Councillor Mann?
In favor.
Councillor Reid?
In favor.
Councillor Wolf?
In favor.
Mayor McGarry?
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. So we'll move on to our next item, number 5, 2500 Kossuth Road, Butterflies Unlimited Corp. We do have one registered delegation today on this item, Mr. Doug Wilson. So I'll ask that we're patient while we're making arrangements for our delegate to join our meeting. And once the delegate joins our meeting, they'll have 5 minutes to speak to their item. And just a reminder that as everyone is aware at this time, our rules do not permit in-person delegations, but they do, pardon me, but will permit electronic submissions received in advance of the meeting. As well, delegates may also call into our meetings to speak to items. And I think that we do have Doug Wilson on the line. Are you there, Doug?
I am, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Great. I'll just make another couple of comments and then invite you to speak. So thank you for coming in and accessing our meeting. And it's always great when technology works when you want it to. So, yeah. So a reminder today that you will have 5 minutes to address council, and please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the agenda item you're speaking to. Otherwise, we may ask you to end your remarks. We do have rules of engagement in council meetings and ask that your remarks are respectful and that you refrain from asking questions of council. I will advise you when your 5 minutes is up, at which time council may have questions for you, and I'll help direct you through that at that time. So welcome again, Doug Wilson. You do have 5 minutes to speak to this item. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor McGarry. Members of council, staff, thank you for the opportunity to speak to you tonight. You have the staff report and recommendations in front of you, and while I understand it is unusual to hear
tax disputes at council. I do appreciate the time you're taking to listen to my concerns, because I believe this is not only a fiduciary matter, but also a matter of principle. So I am deeply grateful for the opportunity. With respect to the report, it is our position that staff have come to the wrong conclusion, and that this council should in fact direct the Chief Financial Officer to refund the remaining taxes overpaid on the property at 2500 Kossuth Road. It's actually hard for me, and I can imagine hard for any fair-minded person listening to these proceedings, to conceive of a world where what is transpiring here can in any way be considered just or fair, or in the interest of promoting a trustworthy standard of interaction between a ratepayer and the municipality. This is a simple matter, and in any other segment of business would be simply addressed. An individual or business, through no fault of their own, is overcharged and overpays for a product or service. The provider recognizes and agrees with the mistake. The provider does the right and fair thing and refunds the overpayment in full. So here we have a third-party impact making a significant error in assessing our property taxes, resulting in an overpayment of those taxes over the course of 2.5 years of approximately $16,000. We made application for those taxes to be refunded, but only a portion, 2017 and 18, were returned. The city, citing their opinion of a section of the Municipal Act, is withholding the overpayment amount of approximately $5,300 for the year 2016. Notwithstanding the fact that this money is clearly not theirs, was received by the city in error, and has been prejudicial to our organization. At the end of the day, this money does not belong to the municipality. It belongs to Cambridge Butterfly Conservatory. Well, I appreciate the time and effort that you, Mayor McGarry, and Councillor Reid and staff have put into this matter. It is my expectation that this elected council would in fact support this constituent. It's my expectation staff would at the very least argue on behalf of the ratepayer and consider the inappropriateness of withholding money that was paid to the city in error and which was not of our doing, and take it upon themselves to consult with the ministry. Further, seeing the unfairness of the Municipal Act begin to affect a change and challenge the act rather than accept what is, even though it is blatantly wrong. I would think that someone in the city would say, wait a second, this isn't right. Let's look into this. By recommending this overpayment not be refunded, staff have become the de facto judge and jury in this matter, referring to a legal opinion they obtained. But at the end of the day, it's just that, it's an opinion. The Municipal Act 2001, paragraph 358, section 1 states the municipality may cancel, reduce, or refund taxes levied in one or both years preceding the year in which the application is made. We are of the opinion that this language is ambiguous and not explicitly clear. The Act does not say, for example, the municipality must not or is prohibited from refunding taxes. The Act does not explicitly say the municipality cannot refund overpaid taxes going back more than 2 years. In fact, I believe the Act was left purposely vague to afford this council, the ability to make a determination that is fair. And to be sure, Madam Chair and members of council, if the tables were turned and Impact made an error that took money out of the municipality's pocket and put it into my pocket, the city would not rest until they had extracted every last penny out of this. Instead, this municipality left it to me to contact the minister directly. So you have the letter in front of you from the minister. He is clear. This council has the authority to do the right thing. It has the authority to make right this wrong. I'd like to make one last point. We are a good, solid corporate citizen. We pay our taxes on time. We contribute enormously to the community. We're not talking about some parking lot or empty field here. This request for fair treatment is about an iconic Cambridge attraction. Madam Chair, councillors, we draw as many as 130,000 visitors every year to Cambridge Butterfly Conservatory, 40% of which are from outside the city and region. These guests visit restaurants, shop at the mall, buy gas, attend other events, and maybe even stay overnight. The economic impact and the ripple effect of dollars spent by these visitors and the contribution they make to municipal taxes is in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. Moreover, at the height of our season, we employ as many as 50 people, and we are a staple for thousands of Cambridge residents and their visiting friends and relatives. So, councillors, this may very well be a crucible moment for you. Will this council maintain that withholding money that does not belong to the municipality is the right thing, or will this council do the right and fair thing by representing this constituent constituent and direct the Chief Financial Officer to refund the overpayment. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, for your delegation. That's your time for this afternoon. I'm going to ask if there's questions for our delegation from members of council. Any questions for a delegation from members of council? Councillor Mann and then Councillor Devine. Councillor Mann, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, thanks for your presentation, Doug. I appreciate the information that you provided. Can you tell me when you first noticed that you had overpaid your taxes?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Mann. If we could turn the clock back, Mike, we simply missed it. It was 2019 when we first noticed that there had been an error. At that time, I went to Impact, and I think probably what happened for us is that with the severance of a house, in my recollection, and correct me if I'm wrong, Treasurer Ayers may be able to do that. I think there was a tax increase at the time, but our mistake, we simply missed it.
Thanks, and if I may, Madam Chair, Doug, so that was 7 years after the sale of the property, the severance and sale of the property at that location, is that correct?
Through you, Madam Mayor, no. The property was severed in 2016, or the property was sold in 2016. It was severed earlier than that.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Devine. Councillor Devine.
Thank you. And Mr. Wilson, thank you for coming and doing the presentation today. Councillor Mann just asked the same question I was going to ask, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, we want to thank you for participating in our meeting and for your delegation today. The meeting is now live streamed, and you're welcome to watch the remainder of the meeting on the City of Cambridge YouTube channel if you'd like. But thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you, Council.
Okay, members of council, are there any questions for staff at this time? Actually, we'll put the motion on the floor at this particular time. Councillor Reid, we'll put the motion and then I'll do the question, sorry. I will ask for Councillor Reid to read the motion in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. So it is moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Devine that report 20-133 CRS re 2500 Kossuth Road - Butterflies Unlimited Corporation be received for information. May I speak to it?
You may go ahead, Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Well, this issue is in my ward, and it's been one that has bothered me because there is an issue that kind of smacks of a little bit of unfairness here, because I would love to be able to hand the money over. We came in, Doug was very good. He came into City Hall. We talked and a couple of times, and we looked at various ways that we might be able to solve this problem in a way in which everyone was happy. I'm sorry to say, we couldn't find that. We couldn't find that way in which it would be open and transparent to the community what we were doing. I cannot support giving the tax money back to him. I understand why he feels the way he feels. I understand how he has come forward, and I appreciate the fact that when you feel strongly about something, you do carry it forward. But it would be setting a precedence that we could ill afford. people can explain this probably in much better ways than I, but the legislation from the province doesn't specifically say, no, you may not do this, but because it doesn't say it, we may not do it. If we were to give this, and it is a smaller amount to the Butterfly Corporation, then we would be obligated in the future to give to others, which might be large amounts that find themselves in this kind of situation. There is a responsibility on everybody. There's a responsibility on MHAC, there's a responsibility on the taxpayer, and there's a responsibility of the city to try to get things right. And I think all of us have tried here, but it wasn't right. And so what we can do, we have done. We've given them back the 2 years that we are allowed to do under the legislation. And unfortunately, I think we have to leave it at that. And I'm going to be supporting the motion to receive for information. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Reid. And just a reminder to members of council that we just have a motion on the floor just to receive the information. And that's what our comments are directed to. Councillor Devine.
Yes, thank you to the chair. I certainly have no problem receiving the information, but there's something here that actually bothers me. If the shoe was on the other foot and somebody owed the city taxes, those people would be expected to pay interest. And from what I can gather here, I don't think there was, with the opposite thing happening, there was no interest paid. So that kind of bothers me. It should work both ways, to be quite honest with you. And I think we're charging 2% a month, I think, on overdue taxes. So I think we need to look at that in situations like this. And and Councillor Reid is right. What Councillor Reid said is correct. We have the MPAC involved, we have the city involved, and there's a responsibility upon the taxpayer too. Maybe it should have been picked up sooner. So, I mean, I can go with the information, but in the future, I think we should be looking at paying out interest because, again, if the shoe was on the other foot, we'd be expecting interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Leggett. Go ahead, Councillor Leggett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I won't be supporting this recommendation. It states that it will be received for information, but that means that once we receive it, then it's now set in stone. The Act allows it to be given to Council for its consideration. Mr. Wilson tried to approach Council back last summer. He applied to be a delegation on this issue and he was turned down, which, funny that we just had the presentation of our strategic plan and about transparency, that sort of thing. And as I've stated before, we have found out over the years many people who have tried to be delegates and they were turned down by our clerk's department, a different clerk, but they were turned down. So council's not aware of many things that the people have tried to come and speak to us on. It's not a question of whether we can, but whether we should keep the money that doesn't belong to us. If we're going to be honest about this, it's not taxpayers' money. It's not like we're giving away something for free. This is the money that belongs to the Butterfly Conservatory. It doesn't belong to the taxpayers here. And I think that there's some morally, I'm very uncomfortable with that. We have an agency in front of us, an entity in front of us who gives so much to this community. And when I look at what it is that they give to our community, the money that they contribute to the economy is stunning, just in jobs alone. And then there's their contributions to the community of all age groups and demographics. So they fit in with everything that's in our strategy of our city and our values. Also, the work that they do with endangered species, with other government agencies, it's the work that wouldn't be done if it wasn't for them. And by not giving them back their money that belongs to them, we cut $5,300 out of their ability to be able to do this type of work. And I think to only do what's the bare minimum, I think is very, very wrong. And I want you to remember something, because most of you here sitting on the screen today, other than the mayor, voted to give $79,000 back to the Hamilton Theatre for taxes that were owing over 3 years. And that was based on an error, apparently, by the two legal entities, the lawyers for the city and the lawyers for the theater. We had no trouble, well, I did, I voted against it, but we had no problem giving that money away, and it was money that did belong to the taxpayers. So I don't comprehend why we wouldn't be just giving them back their money. So what I'm trying to say is that they give back way more to the community than what they're even asking us to give them back. You can't even put a dollar value on what they contribute to this community, and I think it's just wrong not to do that. So I'm not going to vote for this recommendation, and I would hope that staff would be directed to refund them back that money that is owed to them. Thank you.
Councillor Liggett, are you suggesting an amendment to this then? Because it's the only thing that's on there is to receive the report for information.
Either amendment or direction to staff to return them their money. I would think that a motion maybe would be in line to direct them to give back the money. I don't know, the clerk would have to tell me that.
We're just going to confer for a moment. Right, so Councillor Liggett, you're moving that motion?
Yes.
Is there a seconder for that? Do I see a seconder for that?
Councillor Armetta.
Councillor Armetta. Okay. We have some comments from members of council. Councillor Mann, go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and through you, I really have a question for staff. When we look at this, we know that MPAC made the mistake. The Butterflies Incorporated didn't notice it right away, and the time lapse created a problem for repayment. So I suppose my question of staff is, and I know that we've looked at every way possible to try and repay Butterflies. Is there any way of repaying? Without violating the act, is there any way of repayment?
Yeah, go ahead, Cheryl Ayers, our CFO, will address that comment. Go ahead, Ms. Ayers.
Thank you for the question, Councillor Mann. As Councillor Reid mentioned, we did meet with Mr. Wilson on a few different occasions and talk to him about different options for how we could come to a resolution on this matter. We weren't successful in finding any other solutions that were satisfying to both parties, and we didn't go forward with any other options for refunding the money in another way, but we did try.
Councillor Mann?
It's fine. Thanks very much.
Thank you. Councillor Wolf? Go ahead, Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this is a very difficult decision. From what I can understand, our legal advice is that we can't do this without setting a precedent and actually going against the Municipal Act. I think one of the quotes was, "The city is limited by the intent, scope, and clear words of the legislation." I'm wondering, I know we did try to compensate in a different way, and I wonder, have we really exhausted all possibilities? You know, we have things like grants to groups. We support events in the city. I would prefer, if we could, to compensate the Butterfly Museum, which we all appreciate and value in our city, but without sort of breaking the municipal act or setting a precedent. So I would be hoping that we could further keep looking for another way of compensating the museum. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wolf. I believe that was contained in the report, but I'll have Ms. Ayres or Mr. Calder speak to that. Ms. Ayres, go ahead.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor McGarry. Councillor Wolf, your suggestion about the grants to groups was one of the options.
I can't hear you. Could you speak up, please?
One of the options that we did look at was the grants to groups program. Through that program, we can't give a grant to offset tax dollars. So we did speak to Mr. Wilson in the Butterfly Conservatory about coming up with some type of program and applying to grants to groups in the amount of the refund that was owing, so that they could be providing some type of program or benefit to the community, and we could offset the costs of that program through a grant, through the grants to group program. We didn't come to a resolution on that. They didn't come forward with a program as an option, so that discussion didn't go any further.
Thank you. Councillor Mann, you have your hand up. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I wonder, and I know Mr. Wilson is listening, and I know he hasn't got a chance to speak to this, but Councillor Wolf has said it very clearly, and so has Councillor Liggett, and both have presented opposite sides of the coin on this particular issue, no pun intended. But if we can't reimburse because the limitations that are provided under the Municipal Act, and there is a way of doing it through grants to groups, if the Butterfly Unlimited Corp can apply to grants to groups with a program to get that money back, isn't that a better way to do it, so that we maintain the integrity of the Municipal Act, but at the same time we give back the money through an initiative that might come forward through the Butterflies Incorporated? I think there is a way of trying to work around it, where we can make sure we maintain the Municipal Act and pay back the money. And I think we could probably, I hate to say this, I hate to even suggest it, but I think we could make everybody happy if we could come up with a solution like that. And I really appreciate that staff have gone through the initiatives to try and work that way through. But I wonder if this is a better solution, knowing where we're headed right now. So I just want to throw that out and wonder if we could maybe pursue that one more time with him before we vote on this. And maybe that means we need to defer. I don't know. I really threw a fly into this ointment, didn't I?
No, I'm going to go to Mr. Calder on this issue. Mr. Calder.
First of all, Madam Mayor, I think I need some clarity on what the amendment is, and I'll tell you why. If council is directing staff to do something that is contrary to municipal law, we can't do that. We can't knowingly break the law, meaning not being compliant with the legislation. So if you're directing staff to do something that the current legislation doesn't allow for, I'm going to have to say, you know what, you can pass that, but we'll never execute it. So I'm hoping there's a better resolution at hand here. The other thing I want to say is that you have to be very careful with your tax policy. And it is one of the only revenue tools that we have that we need to protect in order to become fair, consistent in terms of its application. And that is what I believe that the Municipal Act is providing for, that the deviations aren't allowed for good reason. And I think if you want to go down this path further to say, you know what, we want to look at deviating from the Act, I would like the opportunity to have legal input, meaning have an in-camera on this so that legal can give you the reasons for their opinion as to why we don't think we should do anything more than actually what we view as the maximum of what the Act allows, not the minimum. Further, I want to comment on, I don't know what happened in the past with Mr. Wilson, but I did have a conversation with him shortly after my arrival with the city and encouraged him to come to council. So we got him in front of council. He's provided his information and he has his viewpoint. But I truly think that you really need to be cautious how you proceed in order to ensure tax fairness for all. And we know there's a variety of different assessment appeals currently out there. This is a gross and manifest error, I believe, that is, again, has limitations through the Act. But if you're struggling with the decision, I would hope you'd give legal an opportunity to give you some perspective first. Mr. Wilson's waited, what, 2-3 years as it is. I think he'd be willing to wait a little longer for a final resolution if you deferred this to either an in-camera after this session or in 2 weeks' time for additional information. So thank you. I've gone on, but I think this is a really important issue that you need to tread carefully on. Thank you. Oh, maybe I should add to, I just want to point out to Mr. Wilson that staff has never suggested that they're not a good corporate citizen, provide value to the community. They do wonderful work, and that's not, we're not suggesting they don't do that. So I'm hoping that Mr. Wilson would at least think that staff are appreciative of the work they do. We're just having to apply legislation, which is what we do, unfortunately. And if there's not flexibility there, it's very hard for us to recommend to do something otherwise than what the legislation we feel tells us we can do. Thank you.
So based on that advice, Councillor Liggett, I'm wondering if you would entertain to withdraw the current motion, go into closed for legal advice at the end of this meeting, or to defer it for closed in 2 weeks' time. Go ahead, please.
Yes, I think the deferral would be the best way to go. That gives everybody a lot of time to gather the information and come back to us. And it also gives staff the opportunity to look at the Budget Conservatory as to how they qualify for grants to groups. I think to go into close now and make that type of a decision just doesn't give enough time for us to think about what they're going to prepare for us as well. So I'm quite easy about removing my motion completely if Councillor Armetta is also willing to remove his name as a seconder.
You're nodding, Miss, just a sec. Councillor Armetta, is that accurate? You're nodding your head yes. Okay, carry on.
So I'll put that deferral on the floor. Deferral
for not the end of this meeting, but for 2 weeks' time in closed session so that we can obtain solicitor advice?
Yes.
Thank you. And
I'll second that, Your Worship.
okay, that's what I was thinking you were getting to. Councillor Mann will second that. Are there any further comments? There's a number of hands up, but you need to be able to speak to this particular motion. If not, would you please remove your hand? And it'll only be time and place. And discussion will come back to this item in 2 weeks. Councillor Devine, you have your hand up. Is that time and place? You've taken it down?
No, hang on.
Go ahead.
There's something that time and place. Yeah. Page 168, last paragraph. I'm just trying to get people's
It's Councillor
attention
Devine.
before. Yes,
Councillor
it is.
Devine, it's only time and place right
Well,
now.
I think we better look at the last paragraph on page 168 before we go too far. I think we need clarification
No,
on
the
that.
deferral's on the floor.
Okay, that's fine. I had my hand up before that.
Thank you for your comments. We're talking to time and place and trying to get the right motion. That's it. Thank you.
It's been up for a while.
That's it. Thank you. Would you take your hand down now, please? Thank you. All right, with no further comment, I'll have Madam Clerk call for the vote for deferral for 2 weeks' time for closed. Madam Clerk.
Thank you, Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries on the deferral.
Thank you. Councillor Devine, can you please mute your phone there?
I've done that for him. It's okay.
Thank you. And just before we move on to item 11, I just want to remind Council of the procedural bylaw that we maintain respect and decorum at all times during a meeting. Remind Council not to interrupt the chair when they're speaking. Thank you. So we'll move on now to item 11, 2019, growth and staging of development. Councillor Adshade, I believe that you have this motion. Would you please read it in its entirety?
I do, Your Worship. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Mehta that Staff Report 20-137 CD 2019 Growth and Staging of Development be received for information. And further, that Council approve the 2019 Growth and Staging of Development Report, which aligns with the approved capital budget to be used for growth-related capital projects associated with infrastructure, secondary plans, sub-watershed plans, and development charge reviews.
Thank you very much. So are there any questions for staff at this particular time? Any questions of staff? Seeing none, are there any comments from members of council? Any comments? Seeing none, we'll move forward to the vote. So I'll ask Madam Clerk to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
Aye, in favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Thank you. The next item that we have now on our agenda is item number 12, provincially significant employment zones, boundary revisions. And Councillor Wolf, I believe that you have this motion. Will you please read it in its entirety? Go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Reid. Provincially significant employment zones boundary revisions. Recommendation that Council Staff Report 20-129 CD Provincially Significant Employment Zones Boundary Revisions be received as information. That's it.
Thank you. So are there any questions from members of council for staff? Any questions? Seeing none, do members of council have any comments at this time? Any comments? Seeing none, I will now ask clerk to call for the vote. So Madam Clerk, over to you.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries.
Thank you. So our next item is item number 13. I can't even speak tonight. Item number 13, the official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 4, 10, and 16 Branchdon Road, Willow Homes, Inc. And now we do have our senior planner, Matthew Blevins, with us today, who will provide a presentation to council. Welcome, Matthew. Oh, there you are. Welcome, and please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor.
We're just waiting for our clerk to start the presentation. There we go. Just let her know when you want the screens switched. Thank you. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Welcome, Madam Mayor, members of council, staff, and the public. Before you this evening is a recommendation report for the official plan and zoning bylaw applications at 410 and 16 Branchdon Road. And I will just say before I get too far in that the applicant's planner, Brandon Flewelling from GSP Group, I believe has put in a delegation request. So if there are questions specifically for the developer, I believe Brandon is available to answer those. If not, I will certainly provide any information that I can. So the property is located at the northwest corner of Branchdon Road and Myers Road, just south of Dundas Street South. A slide. The applicant proposes redevelopment of the lands with 9 fourplex dwellings for a total of 36 units. As indicated, the applications are for site-specific official plan amendment for increased density, as well as a change in zoning with site-specific provisions for reduced front and exterior side yards, increased density, as well as instituting a maximum permitted height. I would also note that the proposal is for an even number of 1-bedroom and 3-bedroom units. So the ground floor of each building would be a 1-bedroom unit, and then the upper floors would be the 3-bedroom units. Slide. I would note that after the public meeting, there was a change to the application. The proposed parking was reduced by 4 parking spaces, and that was to accommodate a requested increase in amenity area. The original application had 9.3 square meters per unit, that's 100 square feet. So that was a total of 334.8 square meters, or 3,600 square feet for the entire development. The applicant has now increased that to 30 square meters per unit, or 322 square feet. And that's a total of 1,080 square meters, or just under 12,000 square feet. So that was accommodated through a combination of reduction in 4 parking spaces, as well as a change in the design of the buildings. So the parking was reduced from a proposed 51 spaces down to 47. So that would be 36 spaces for residents and 11 visitor spaces. That is still 2 more than the spaces required by the bylaw. So the zoning bylaw would require 45 spaces, and they're providing 47. Slide, please. This is the concept site plan showing access to the development from both Branchdon Road as well as Myers Road. If I could have the next slide, please. This shows the requested reduction, so a reduced front yard setback of 4.7 meters, or approximately 15 feet on the Branchdon Road side, and then a reduced exterior side yard setback of 3.7 meters, or 12 feet along the Myers Road frontage. Slide, please. The applicant has also provided some elevations for the development. There was some discussion back and forth with staff and the developer. There were no members of the public that provided input at the public meeting or written submissions, but questions were raised at the statutory public meeting by committee about the ultimate design of the structures. So I've included 2 of the 3 proposed elevations. All 3 elevations are provided in detail in the staff report. So this is the front elevation. Slide, please. So this shows the accompanying side of elevation for that option. Slide, please. This is the other design concept. Next slide. And that shows the accompanying side elevation with the front entranceways. Slide, please. For the considerations in this recommendation report, as I indicated, there were no public comments received. Did look at compatibility with surrounding residential neighborhood, as well as consistency with provincial, regional, and city policy. There's detailed planning analysis in the staff report, but I'm happy to address any questions that there may be surrounding those items. Also looked at compliance with the City of Cambridge zoning bylaw, environmental and transportation considerations, as well as the appropriateness of the site-specific provisions requested. I also note that there was a question raised about the intersection of Branchdon Road and Dundas Street South specifically. And this application does not look specifically at the impacts to the intersection of Branchdon Road and Dundas Street South, but there are a number of other development applications in the Southeast Galt area with studies that will look at the operation and function of the intersection at Branchdon and Dundas. Slide, please. I will note that the staff report in the agenda package does indicate that the change in zoning is from the C2O commercial and R4 single detached residential to RM3 with a site-specific and a holding provision. Between finalization of the staff report and this evening's meeting, the applicant was able to satisfy the requirements for the holding, and the their holding provision has been removed from the draft bylaw. Staff have worked in consultation with clerks to ensure that the correct bylaw and the appropriate motion wording have been provided for this evening's meeting. In all other respects, the recommendation is as printed in the report. And I'm happy to address any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Blevin. I'm just going to wait till this comes off and then I can see everybody again. Hang on just for a second. Don't go far, Matthew. The next 2 items are yours as well. So just hang on for a second. Thank you. We do have 1 registered delegate on the on this item. Hang on just for a second. Thank you. And before I go to Councillor Reid, I just wanted to note that we have the delegation on the on this item on the line with us, and that's Brandon Flewelling. And as I will just see if you can hear me, Brandon.
He's on mute.
Okay, there he is. Hi, Brandon. It's Mayor McGarry.
Good evening, Mayor McGarry and members of council. I'm happy to be with you tonight.
Great. And I'm just going to go through a couple of things. I just wanted to make sure that we had your audio set.
Thank you.
And just as a reminder to our public that, as everyone is aware, that the rules do not permit in-person delegations right now, but will permit the electronic submissions received in advance of the meeting. As well, delegates may also call into our meetings to speak to items, which we have already done right now. So thank you very much. Brandon, just ahead of us going to you, I'm just going to ask Councillor Reid if she had a question for the presenter, Mr. Blevin. Councillor Reid?
Yes, I did have just a short question, I'm sure, but I noticed that in the report that it says that there are noise warning clauses needed for this development, and I wondered why.
Councillor Reid, I think we'll leave this till after the delegation, all right, when we go to questions from council to Mr. Blevin. Okay?
Okay.
So we'll
ask it again? Leave my hand up?
No, take it down for now, and then when we're finished with the delegation, otherwise I'll get confused if it's a question to the delegation, and we'll go from there. As I said, there's a lot going on these electronic meetings. Anyway, Brandon, welcome. I know that you know this, but I will just go through that you do have 5 minutes to address council. So please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the item that you are speaking to on the agenda. Otherwise, we might ask you to end your remarks. We do have rules of engagement in council meetings. We do ask that you ensure that your remarks are respectful and that you refrain from asking questions of council. So I'll advise you when your 5 minutes is up, at which time council may have questions for you, and I'll guide you through that process at that particular time. So welcome, Brandon. You now have 5 minutes to speak to this item.
Thank you, Mayor McGarry, and good evening, members of council. I'll keep this short. I'm certainly here in support of the staff report and the recommendations. I think Mr. Blevins has done a good job to walk you through the changes that we've proposed or that we've landed on for the site plan since the original public meeting. And really the main change was to provide a larger central amenity area. We moved around some of the parking spaces, and we were able to provide a larger central amenity area that was a big part of the comments received from staff, as well as comments that we heard through council members sitting as planning committee. So we spent quite a bit of time with planning staff looking at the design of the site, the location of the amenity areas, the setbacks, the looks of the building, and all those types of details. We talked about surrounding land uses and so on. And we're quite happy with where things have ended up. The zoning, the site-specific zoning that's requested is a large factor related to the extensive road widenings that are required along both the Myers and Branchton Road frontages. So that has played into the need to push the buildings a little closer to the street. But again, the design of the building seems to work quite well, and I think we've landed on a nice compromise situation where we get a presence of the buildings close to the street, but there's still sufficient amenity area, both small private amenity area for each unit and then larger common amenity area for the residents to use jointly. I think that we've landed in a good place for the overall design and certainly support the staff report and the recommendations. I would comment on Councillor Reid's comment about the noise warning. That was as a result of traffic noise that was that's present in the area, and it's a fairly common warning clause suggesting that residents are advised that there's traffic noise in the area, and that essentially that's a warning that goes out to future purchasers, just so there's nobody surprised. And that's fairly common, especially along regional roads such as this. So I think I'll conclude my comments there, but I just wanted to let council know that we worked closely with staff, had a lot of really beneficial meetings, and we're excited where this project's at now and look forward to bringing it forward. So I'll conclude there and answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Brandon. And I will move forward to see if any members of council have questions for you. Last call. I don't see any. So thank you very much for joining us today. You're welcome to continue to watch the meeting. We're live streaming it on YouTube. So thank you very much for your presentation today.
Great. Thank you. I will continue to watch.
Okay, now we'll move forward for questions for staff. And Councillor Reid, I think you're first up on that one.
Actually, Mr. Fleuring, you answered my question, so I don't have to ask it again. But thank you for the opportunity.
I did promise, so there you have it. Are there any other further questions from members of council? Yep, seeing none. Are there any comments from members of council? So seeing none, we're now ready for the motion. I think Councillor Wolf, you have the motion at this time. Please go ahead, read it. Now it goes. Go ahead, Councillor Wolf, and please read the motion in its entirety.
Do I have the motion?
The motion, Your Worship, with Councillor Wolf.
It's Councillor Edshade.
Oh, so that solves the mystery. Okay, Councillor Adshade, you have the motion. You go right ahead now. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Worship. And it's moved myself, second by Councillor Wolf. Recommendation report, official plan amendment and zoning bylaw amendment 4, 10 and 16 Branston Road, Willow Homes Incorporated. That report 20-149 CD be received. And that Cambridge Council adopts official plan amendment number 44 with a site-specific policy to increase the permitted density on the subject lands within the low medium density residential designation. And that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to rezone the subject property from C2O commercial and R4 semi-detached residential to RM3S.4.1 388 with site-specific provisions to permit development of the land with up to 36 residential units. And that Cambridge Council is satisfied that a subsequent plan, bracket 17 of the Planning Act, is not required. And further, that bylaws attached to report 20-149 CD be passed.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Adshade. Are there any questions of staff at this time? Seeing none, are there any comments from council members at this time? Yep, seeing none, I will now call for the vote. So Madam Clerk, will you please call for the vote?
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries. We'll be right with you. Thank you. Some technical difficulties, but we are now ready to move ahead. Thank you. So the next item is number 14, the recommendation report for 115 Wellington Street, zoning bylaw amendment, Argus residence for young people. And Matthew Blevins is going to provide us with a presentation for this item as well. And we'll also have a delegation on the item. So Matthew, thank you for joining us again this evening, and we'll begin with your presentation and then move to the delegation.
Thank you again, Madam Mayor.
We're just waiting for the clerk now to share the screen. So just give us a second to load up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And as the presentation is coming up, I will point out that this application and the following application for 740 William Street are both almost identical. There are a couple of small differences, but I will provide a fair bit of information in this presentation. And then if it's okay with you, Madam Mayor and Council, I will have a far reduced presentation for the second application to just highlight the differences. So before you this evening is a recommendation report for zoning bylaw amendment application at 115 Wellington Street, application R0719. This is a graphical representation of the planning process, and as you can see, we are quite near the end of the process where the recommendation is being brought forward to Council. Slide, please. The property is located on the southeast side of Wellington Street, between Roseview Avenue and Bond Street, just outside of the golf course. Slide, please. The applicant proposes to convert an existing residential special care facility to a Class 2 group home. The application is to facilitate proposed changes from shorter term to a longer term care model. I know there was a fair bit of discussion about the timeframes at the statutory public meetings. I've since had the opportunity to discuss this matter with the applicant and their representative. The shorter term care model that they currently have is for emergency shelter stage, which can be in the neighborhood of 1 to 2 weeks through to perhaps 1 or 2 months. The longer term care model, they are looking at residents between the ages of 14 and 18. So they could potentially have a resident staying there for 4 years. The intent of the facility is to allow for reintegration of the residents back into their family homes where possible. So it could be shorter stays of 1 to 2 weeks or months, but it may go as long as 4 years. And I would point out that the existing site-specific zoning permits a residential special care facility with up to 15 residents and 8 parking spaces. Slide, please. This is exterior photo of the existing property, 115 Wellington Street. You can see the parking spaces out front. Slide, please. For the considerations, staff looked at the comments received from committee and the public. Those included what happens to the current residents at the facility when the programming changes to accommodate younger residents. Can a specific age range be applied to the site-specific zoning? Are treatment services provided at the facility? The appropriateness of older and younger children housed in the same facility, and concerns with operation of a group home, as well as parking. Sorry, if I could go back a slide, please. I will just point out, certainly the planning analysis looks at a number of items. There's also a separate attachment in the report that deals specifically with the questions raised and the responses. I just would point out that treatment services are not provided at the facility. And the question of age range being applied to the site-specific zoning, zoning cannot differentiate based on things like age and relationship. So the possibility of an age range on the zoning, or the appropriateness, of older and younger children housed in the same facility, as well as the general operation of a group home, are outside the scope of land use planning, and so are not covered in great detail in the staff report. But the attachment does reference the comments that were raised. Slide, please. So the recommendation is as printed in the report, and it is to recommend approval of the proposed zoning bylaw to add Class 2 group home as a permitted use to the site-specific zoning on the subject property. I'm happy to address any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blevin. So at this time, are there any questions from staff on the presentation? And seeing none, are there any comments before we go to the delegation? And seeing none, we'll move ahead and let you know that we do have one registered delegation on this item today, Michael J. Pass. So I'll ask for your patience again as we once again try and get the delegation to join the meeting. And as you know, they'll have 5 minutes to speak to this item. Staff are just trying to locate the delegate. So just hang on, please. So while we're trying to locate the delegate, I'm going to call for a 5-minute recess. So we'll see you in 5 minutes.
Okay, we're back. I see everybody back there. Thanks. Michael, are you on the line? It's Mayor McGarry.
Yes, I am.
Okay, just give me a minute. We can hear you loud and clear. Sorry for the delay. But thank you for joining us today to delegate. So just a reminder to you that you have 5 minutes to address council. Please ensure that your remarks relate directly to the agenda item that you're speaking to. Otherwise, we may ask that you end your remarks. We do have rules of engagement in council meetings and ask that you ensure that your remarks are respectful and that you refrain from asking questions of council. So I'll advise you when your 5 minutes is up, at which time council may have questions for you, and I'll guide you through that process. So welcome again, Michael, and you now have 5 minutes to speak to this item. Please go ahead.
All right. Well, thank you everyone for having me, and sorry regarding the phone issues earlier. I was told my phone is busy, but they called me to tell me that, so I don't know if I understand that. Also with me is the Executive Director of Argus, Eva Blazov. We're not going to make any kind of large presentation tonight. We think the materials Mr. Blevins prepared speaks for themselves, but we wanted to be available to answer any questions that may arise. And additionally, as part of our application, we're requesting that the city consider either a full or partial refund of the fees paid for the applications, assuming they approve of the applications. We would state that Argus is a charity, number one. Two, the applications are for a very noble purpose, we think, that of combating youth homelessness. Three, the applications themselves are quite technical in nature, and perhaps Mr. Blevins can speak to that further, but we're not building anything or changing the exterior of the building. We're really changing the use of it slightly. And then finally, the applications, if they're successful, would allow the applicant to fulfill a need within the community, that being combating youth homelessness. And it's Argus's position that this longer-term care home is where the need is greatest at this point. So like I said, those are our comments, but we're more than happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Just before I move on to any questions of the delegation, I did see that our Chief Planner, Elaine Brunshaw, had her hand up. Ms. Brunshaw, did you want to speak now, or?
Yes, thank you. In response to Mr. Pass's request, the reason he's made the request is under the Planning Act, planning staff or city staff cannot waive planning application fees, only council can. And in light of the status of this particular organization, if this application is approved, staff would be supportive of issuing a refund for the 2 planning applications. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the clarification. So now we'll move ahead and see if there's any questions for the delegation. Members of council? Councillor Mann, go ahead. Councillor Mann.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm sure Councillor Liggett is probably of the same mind in relation to this, and I know it applies to 740 William as well. Both facilities are identified as currently existing or operating as an emergency shelter, providing a temporary safe place to stay for homeless youth. And I know we're changing that because we have a different priority, and the need is greater to deal with the long-term cares and reintegrating young people back into their families. What is the plan to do with the young, for the young homeless people, the emergency shelter that will disappear? How do we look after our young people who will need that kind of facility? Because there will always be some, and I just want to make sure that they don't fall through the cracks as we proceed with this.
Madam Chair, through you, it's Eva Blazov from Argus Residents for Young People. Argus will continue to work with the region of Waterloo and its community partners to determine a region-wide youth homelessness prevention response and strategy. For those youth who do become homeless in Cambridge, Argus will refer to another system partner within our local serving system.
Thank you. And if I can just clarify, Madam Chair. So is that going to be, when you say within the Argus serving area, that could be anywhere within the region or beyond?
That's within the region of Waterloo.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett, you have the floor. Councillor Liggett. You are muted. Just one moment.
Eva, when you say another service provider, it can be anywhere in the region. And, it's always a danger when you take any child out of their community and the streets they know, the buildings they know, the shops they know. But you haven't said what the providers they could be throughout the region. Are there any others in Cambridge? And if not, what specific service providers are you talking about?
Okay, I think I'll answer your question in two parts. First is to provide some context. So over the last 5 years, Argus, in consultation with the region of Waterloo, has been leading efforts to reduce youth homelessness, prevent it entirely, and reduce a reliance on the emergency shelter system in Cambridge. This has led to a significant reduction in the need for emergency shelter for youth in Cambridge. For youth who do become homeless in Cambridge, there are 2 other youth shelters within the shelter system. One is Safe Haven. They work with young people between the ages of 12 to 18, and that service is run through Lutherwood. There is another service by the name of One Roof. My understanding is that they work with young people between the ages of 16 to 25. Argus has maintained a referral partnership with those 2 emergency shelters for decades. I guess lastly, in addition to that, I'll be joining the region of Waterloo is hosting a meeting this Thursday to talk about, have a further discussion with regard to referral protocol and transportation for youth should they need emergency shelter. But Argus will continue to provide youth homelessness prevention and shelter diversion services, again in consultation with the region of Waterloo moving forward.
Okay. Any further questions, Councillor Liggett? Nope. Okay. We do have another question from Councillor Mann. Councillor Mann?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through you, just in relation to that answer, then Eva, both Safe Haven and One Roof are not located in Cambridge, are they?
No.
Right. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any other questions for the delegation? Seeing none, I want to thank you both for attending this evening. As you know, this meeting is being live streamed on YouTube. So once you're off the call, you are certainly welcome to join in and watch the rest of the meeting. But again, thank you for coming in today.
All right, thank you.
Okay, prior to questions for staff, if there's any further, I'm going to ask Councillor Liggett now to provide the motion. So will you please read it in its entirety? Oh, just before we go there, sorry, Mr. Brongbird, did you have a comment?
Just a quick comment related to the ask around the fees. Certainly council could include that with any kind of recommendation which they're about to put on the floor, or they can do it as a separate item. So I'll just make that as a point. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Liggett, are you ready for the motion?
I am. I don't know who has the who my seconder is.
Councillor Ermetta.
Okay, moved by myself that report 20-160 CD be received and that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to add Class 2 group home as a permitted use to the site specific R4 S.4.2-63 residential zone to permit the existing residential care facility to revise the parameters of their care program and provincial operating license, and further that the bylaw attached to report 20-160 CD be passed. And I'd like to comment, please.
Yep, go ahead.
I support the work that's going to be done here. I do have concerns for the future. I find that what's most likely going to happen, and I hate to try to portend what's going to happen, but I think we're going to have a lot of untethered youth in our community with the lack of a facility that's in their own community. And to me, it's similar to when you take children out of their own neighborhood and send them off to school that's distant from their own neighborhood. They have a sense of not belonging, and they have a lack of caring for their neighbors and just the general area in which they live. And I can see that children who are in these types of facilities are already struggling with their emotions, mental health. I think without something here in this city, it's going to, that type of mental problem, emotional problem is going to be added to. So I can't just simply support this without making those comments, but I am supportive of this. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Councillor Wolf, you're next. Councillor Wolf.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I support this motion, and I strongly support Argus as an organization, and I especially applaud the prevention work to prevent youth homelessness in the first place that they've been involved in it, that they continue to do. I know it would be nice to also have an emergency shelter for youth in Cambridge, but when we looked at the stats from Argus, I was pleased to see that there was very little need for it, but there is need for the longer term placement of youth and the desire to actually reconnect them with their family. So kudos to Argus again, and I will support the motion.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for staff, or does seeing none, does council have any further comments? Councillor Devine, go ahead. Councillor Devine.
Yes, to the chair. Do we need an amendment to that motion for Argus to receive their funding back for their fees that they paid, or would that be a separate motion?
We can do that as a separate motion if you can. So we could vote on this one, and then I would entertain a motion from you or from a member of council if you'd like to put that on the floor and debate it at that time.
Sure, we'll do that after this one. Thank you.
So we'll go ahead and vote, then, members of council, on this particular one, and then I'll entertain a motion if there's one to come forward from the floor. Okay, so if there's no further comments, then we are ready for the, just one moment.
I'm back. We have discussed and conferred with our clerks, and we felt that it's probably best to put an amendment to the main motion, if that's what you'd like to do. It's just a little cleaner. So I'll go back to Councillor Devine, who suggested it, and see if that's if you've got a seconder for that. And do you want to just go ahead and speak to it, Councillor Devine?
Yeah, I'd like to make that amendment that the fees for 115 Wellington that the city reimburse Argus for that. And if I could get a seconder, that would be great.
Councillor Reid.
Okay,
Councillor Reid will.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Reid. So I'd just like to speak on that. I think that's important. They do a lot of good work in the community, and I think we all know how stressed things are, particularly for the youth. And if we can, if Argus residents can send them on the right path, I think that's absolutely wonderful. And if we can help them out, we need to do that. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody else who would like to speak to the amendment on the floor, which is to waive the planning related fees? Sorry, reimburse. And Councillor Reid, go ahead.
Of course, I'm in support of this motion, but I wonder if it will extend to the fees for the next one that we're going to deal with on William Street.
We'll look at it when that one comes forward to us. So
Okay.
We'll just speak to the amendment that's on the floor right now, which is 115 Wellington.
That's fine by me.
Okay, so we're clear on what we're voting on. Councillor Devine, would you lower the hand there just so that it doesn't catch my attention, unless you wanted to speak again? Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go ahead and we'll vote on the amendment first, and then we'll go back to the main motion. All right, so I'm going to call the question, and I'll ask Madam Clerk to call the vote. Madam Clerk?
On the amendment, Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries on the amendment.
Thank you. And now we'll move forward and vote on the main motion. And so I'll ask Madam Clerk to call for the vote. Go ahead.
This is on the main motion as amended. Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry, Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Okay, so the next item is item number 15, 740 William Street, and the zoning bylaw amendment. The Roman Catholic Episcopal Corporation of the Diocese of the Hamilton in Ontario. So again, Matthew Blevins will provide I understand, a shorter presentation for this item. So thank you, Matthew. And we'll just get the clerk to load up the presentation.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. And yes, through to, through you to council, if they are okay with me providing a far shorter presentation, I'm happy to do so. So the application before you is for 740 William Street. It's application R0819, and this is just outside the Preston Court area. Slide, please. Similar to the previous application, this is near the end of the process, whereby the recommendation is coming forward to council. Slide, please. Property is located on the south side of William Street between Westminster Drive North and Church Street North. And of note is the church to the southwest and the associated parking area. to the west of the subject property. Slide, please. This is the same general proposal as the previous application. I would note, however, that the existing care facility has 10 residents and 15 parking spaces. In all of their aspects, the applicant is proposing the same conversion to a Class 2 group home for the same purposes. So I'm happy to, I will note that there was one member of the public, a neighbor, who came out for this application specifically to speak about children congregating on the property. And that comment has been addressed through the staff report. So if there are any questions from council, I'm more than happy to address those now.
Thank you for your presentation. So just ahead of questions for staff, I might just ask for Councillor Mann to put the motion on the floor. Councillor Mann, you have the motion. Go ahead.
I do, Madam Chair, and I'd like to add a portion to it so that it would be similar to the previous motion of reimbursing any planning fees that are incurred. So if we can just add that to the motion, and I would include that with the motion as I read it. It's moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Reid in the recommendation that report 20-161 CD be received, and that Cambridge Council approves the proposed zoning bylaw amendment to add Class 2 group home as a permitted use to the site-specific N1 S.4.2-63 institutional zone to permit the existing residential care facility to revise the parameters of their care program and provincial operating license. And further, that the bylaw attached to the report, report 20-161 CD, be passed, and further that reimbursement to Argus of any planning fees would also be included.
Thank you, and I'm just going to see if the seconder was okay with that. Councillor Reid, were you okay with that piece of it? Okay. Now we'll call for questions for staff. Are there any questions for staff from members of council? And seeing none, are there any further comments from members of council at this time? And seeing none, I think we're ready to call for the vote. So, Madam Clerk, please.
Thank you. Councillor Adshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Mehta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
All right, thank you. Okay, we'll move ahead now to item number 16, request for a credit for service agreement for Cambridge West. And Councillor Wolf, I believe you have this motion. Yep. Yes. So go ahead, please.
Through you, Madam Mayor, moved by myself, second by Councillor Adshade. Recommendation that the request for a credit for service agreement by the Cambridge West developers for design and construction of works described in report 20-162 CD be approved, and that the mayor and the clerk be authorized to execute a credit for service agreement prepared in accordance with the credit for service agreement policy and to the satisfaction of the city solicitor, and that council approve an amendment to the credit for service agreement subject to the satisfaction of the city solicitor should a future development charge funded capital project for trails be approved through a future budget. And further, that the credit for service agreement include appropriate credits and or refunds for any design work and construction completed prior to the execution of the agreement subject to proper design, approvals, notice, inspection, and documentation to the satisfaction of the city engineer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions for for staff? Any comments from members of council? And seeing none, I'll have Madam Clerk call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Councillor Atshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Armetta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries.
Thank you. So our next item is the introduction and consideration of bylaws. Councillor Liggett, I believe you have this motion. Please read it in its entirety.
Okay, just bear with me 1 second. Sorry, I don't know which ones I had motions for. So am I unmuted?
Yes, yep, you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Introduction and consideration of bylaws 20-064 being a bylaw of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge to amend zoning bylaw number 150-85 is amended with respect to land municipally known as 4, 10, and 16 Branchton Road. 20-065 being a bylaw of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge to amend zoning bylaw number 150-85 is amended with respect to land municipally known as 115 Wellington Street. 20-066 being a bylaw of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge to amend zoning bylaw number 150-85 is amended with respect to land municipally known as 740 William Street. Sorry, I should have said moved and seconded by, but
I did it again. So yes, Councillor Armetta seconded that. Okay, are there any questions for staff? Any questions from members of council or any comments? Seeing none, ready to call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Atshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Armetta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
in favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries.
Thank you. Now we'll move to the confirmatory bylaw. Councillor Armetta, I believe that you have this motion. Please read it in its entirety.
You're on mute, Councillor Armetta.
Good, I'm unmuted. Technology. So, all right. So it's moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Mann. Confirmatory bylaw being a bylaw of the City of Cambridge to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Cambridge at its meeting held on the 14th day of July 2020, passed and enacted this 14th day of July 2020.
Thank you. Now we're ready to call for the vote, so I'll ask our clerk to do so. Madam Clerk?
Councillor Atshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Armetta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
That carries.
Thank you. And now we're going to move to the close of the meeting. Councillor Wolf, you have the happy motion for close of meeting. Please read it in its entirety.
Through you, Madam Mayor, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Atshade, that this meeting will close at 8:16 p.m.
Thank you. And we'll call for the vote. Madam Clerk?
Thank you. Councillor Atshade.
In favor.
Councillor Devine.
Aye.
Councillor Armetta.
In favor.
Councillor Liggett.
In favor.
Councillor Mann.
In favor.
Councillor Reid.
In favor.
Councillor Wolf.
In favor.
Mayor McGarry.
In favor.
And that carries.
Well, thank you very much for joining us this evening. I do now call an end to this session.
And I also wanted to say just before we conclude to remember to physically distance, wear a mask when you're in indoor public places, wash your hands frequently, and the most important thing, look after each other. Be kind. Thanks very much for joining us.